All right, we're back again with another episode of the Fantasy Football Universe. He is BC Steele. I'm not spelling it out this time because we're limited on the amount of time we can spend on videos, and I don't need to take 35 minutes getting the intro correct. I think I'm Nick from CWE still. If you don't know who I am, just go to most of the PGA DFS contests on DraftKings, scroll to the bottom, and then you'll know who I am. It's been a bad week. I'm very angry.
Your pain is so enjoyable.
It is. I don't even care. It's just like, whatever. It happened. So we're not here to talk about how Jason Day is a shell of his former self. Hey, he may be the golf version of Christian Hackenberg, except Christian Hackenberg never was anything.
Wow, early getting that reference in. Look at you. You're on point today.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. But we did a video. It was released earlier this week because it takes me like 3 times longer than everyone else to do anything, even though it was recorded last Friday.
That's the spirit.
We did the quarterback rankings. Got to try to pound out the running back rankings. A lot of interesting movement now. Just for perspective, I did my first batch of rankings like all on June 1st, and I told myself that once a month up until the start of the season, and then every week until the start of the season, and probably a couple times of the week really before the start of the season, I was going to update my rankings. So I've already got guys on here that I'm like, yeah, I'm bumping them up, or other guys where I'm like, yeah, they're going to go a little bit further down the list. But BC, pretty standard across the top of the board. David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. There's nothing to discuss in that, right?
Absolutely. You'll probably have somebody argue Le'Veon Bell should be lower because of injury and pot concerns, but look at when he's on the field. If I take him second overall as far as a running, well, not second overall, but second running back off the board, I feel good about it. So, yeah, nothing really to go there. I'll actually argue the top 5. LaShawn McCoy, he's at number 4. His only worry was Mike Gillislee, and he's in New England, so I think a solid number 4. And Melvin Gordon, possibly, even more involved in the pass game this year. So I think the top 5 is set. I do have issue with number 6, though.
Yeah, so I think the top 3 are basically the top 2, regardless of the format, unless it's some weird format that weighs running backs incredibly low. There's no way that I'm not taking David Johnson or Bell 1 or 2. My preference at this point is Johnson, but there is nothing wrong with Le'Veon Bell. Like, if you wait to 2, if I have the second pick in the draft, I'm probably feeling great, because if I don't get David Johnson, I'm getting Le'Veon Bell. That's a hell of a consolation prize. And if I wanted David Johnson, someone else might like Le'Veon Bell, and I might end up with him anyway. A lot of times, I'm just being completely honest, and we'll get to it in the next video, but I like Julio Jones a lot this year. He's actually my number 1 receiver. I actually don't mind taking him over Ezekiel Elliott, but that's just because I personally have some concerns. I don't know if we're going to do like an overall rankings video, because that's really tough, and I mean, by the time we would finish the podcast, we'd have to do another one to account for what's changed. But you bring up a good point. Jordan Howard is a guy I'm a little bit confused about. I've read some reports that they want his pass game inclusion to increase a little bit more, which does, I think, give me faith, because if you look at a lot of these other guys, most of them not being taken off the field for receiving backs, but I'm curious to hear what your issue with Jordan Howard is.
Well, let's eliminate, first of all, the excitement that Tariq Cohen has been putting on in OTAs. However, I like Tariq Cohen. Runs a 4.42. He is only 179 pounds. He reminds me a little bit of a Darren Sproles type. But that, coupled with the fact that Jordan Howard is going to be run into the ground, unless you have faith in the receiving corps of the Chicago Bears, which outside of Chicago and fantasy football nerds, us included, obviously, probably couldn't even name one. Well, Mike White, that doesn't really count, but
who?
Eddie, exactly.
Or no, Mike. You've proved your own point. Thank you. I was going to go with White Kevin to try to be a little bit racy with things, but
Kevin White, same thing. Well, last year I did call the Dallas Texans, so I don't know what's going on.
Mike White is actually the quarterback of Western Kentucky, where offensive lineman stud Forrest Lamp came from, as well as a receiver we might talk about later, Taywan Taylor. But let's, keep on track because I'll digress really quickly.
And Mike White could be a better quarterback now than Christian Hackenberg. Boom!
He is.
I'm kidding. If he sees this, I have nothing against him. I can't speak for my co-host. But no, Jordan Howard, I do have some worry that he's going to get run into the ground. If you take Jordan Howard, I'm going to probably try and get Tariq Cohen at this point. I'm going to try and get him later. We all remember the hype for Jeremy Langford, how everyone was excited. They said this guy was going to be a superstar. He's going to be a stud. But if you looked at numbers, he was volume. He wasn't necessarily ability. A little bit different for Jordan Howard. He wants to lead the league in rushing. That's an awesome goal to have. I don't think it's going to happen. I think with Jordan Howard, you're safer drafting him as an RB2, a high RB2. But for me, I just don't think Chicago is going to have much going for him. I actually think Chicago could have the top pick in the draft. I actually think they're going to be that bad.
So let me ask you this question. What worries you more about Howard's workload over a guy like Melvin Gordon, LaShawn McCoy, Elliott, Bell, and Johnson, who are all notorious having these huge loads? I tried to word that better. It just didn't happen, okay?
I'm going to skip over that, even though my brain is going to explode with all the jokes. But 1, supporting cast, 2, offensive line, and 3, this shouldn't play a factor in it, but after seeing the draft, do you have any faith in any coaching or front office in Chicago at this point? I mean, I heard John Lynch is going to run up to Chicago and tell them to bench Jordan Howard.
He's just going to tell them, I'd really like Jordan Howard. And they'll be like, we'll give you him and our first-round draft pick next year. We just really like you guys. I think that's a valid point. There's nothing wrong with that perspective. I pointed out in an article I wrote about my mock draft from the 6th position today, just like, I think a lot of people look at situations like Jordan Howard and say, crappy team, going to be hard for him to see consistency. But let me run some names off from another crappy team, and I know you're going to recognize the trend here. And if you don't, the idea is that these were probably all on championship rosters when it happened. Peyton Hillis, Josh Gordon, Jordan Cameron, Gary Barnidge, and Terrell Pryor. It's like the Browns have been crappy forever, but those guys all had huge fantasy impacts, even though there was nothing going on around them. So I'm really torn. That's why, in drafts, I did it from the 6th pick yesterday, and I just got lucky, and Julio Jones happened to go 6. So I was like, all right, I don't have to deal with this. Am I taking Jordan Howard? Finishing out the rest of the top 10, Devonta Freeman, Jay Ajayi, DeMarco Murray, Leonard Fournette. Of any of those guys, are there concerning points for you there? Or are all of them concerning?
The only real concern I have, and I'm going to look his age up so I don't sound like a total boob. DeMarco Murray last year, I would say biggest surprise at running back, other than the running back making a return as far as a valuable position. DeMarco Murray is 29 years old. They have Derrick Henry in the backfield waiting in the wing. Derrick Henry proved he can carry the ball. I don't want to say to get off the DeMarco Murray train. I'm just saying as an RB1 in a 10 or 12 team league, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. Maybe I'd look somewhere else. A guy that you have 11, Isaiah Crowell, I feel could outproduce DeMarco Murray. We've talked before, Cleveland's offensive line, which you mentioned with Peyton Hillis and Jordan Cameron, they've had good offensive lines. When you're a wide receiver, targets can be a big deal, especially if you're running short routes. When you're a running back, that can help, but it's not always the determining factor. The injury risk is high and a lot of other factors. But I actually like Crowell over Murray this year. A guy that's interesting, and I want to get your thought process on it, is Bilal Powell at 13 for the Jets.
Yeah, if you recall, last year when we did the podcast with Pete Overzet, do you remember that? That was a guy that he and I discussed a little bit, and we were both kind of in the position last year where it was like, This guy has talent. He doesn't have the name brand that Matt Forte has. But again, you look at the end of the season, who's producing well, who's the guy that is doing it for the team, and it was Bilal Powell. So he's a guy that I feel comfortable at there. I really do. I feel better about Todd Gurley. Like, he's probably not going to move up on my list this year. He's at 12, right ahead of Powell. Probably not going to move up much further than that, but he's got a better left tackle. So if nothing else, he has a better opportunity on the left side. They've got some better tight ends now with Gerald Everett getting drafted. McCaffrey's a guy I think I could be dropping down a little bit. I think I read a stat where it's been like in the last decade, basically backs from Carolina just don't catch the football. Now a lot of that could be the talent they have, so you don't want to be too, discriminating. But let me tell you from a college football perspective what happened a lot, because college football used to be able to play DFS. Nothing more annoying than when Stanford drove down the field and Christian McCaffrey's busting off 40 and 50-yard runs, and he gets to the 3-yard line, and Christian McCaffrey ain't in the game. It's Bryce Love at the goal line. What do you think's going to happen in Carolina? I don't know if you've looked at McCaffrey. He may be fun to watch, and he can zig and zag, but the dude is tiny. Like, you don't put tiny running backs at the goal line, so that could be an issue, and touchdowns are already fickle enough as it is. If you're looking at a situation where I told you he's going to score 3 rushing touchdowns and 2 in the air, now I'm really highly questioning where he's at. A guy that I do want to move up is Carlos Hyde. There was a lot of concern about Joe Williams from Utah coming in and giving him a run for the money. Now it's being reported that Joe Williams doesn't even look as good as Matt Breida, who is one of my favorites from Georgia Southern. Just spells to me the fact that even if Kyle Shanahan may not like him that much, he's the best they've got. They brought in, I think they brought in Kyle Juszczyk. I have a very difficult time pronouncing his name. There's too many Z's and Y's, and I think an X and a Q possibly in there. And
they have the Batman symbol and a hyphen for no reason.
His name should just be a symbol, would just be easier. But
he could be like Prince. But yeah, I see your point on that. So no, I'm not totally Kyle Juszczyk.
Okay.
I had it.
What's that? It's Juszczyk. Juszczyk. Okay, that sounds right. I think that's who they brought in.
Let me throw you 3 names, because it was another thing looking at these, and these are actually 3 guys that I was on the hype train going into 2016. They're 3 guys that are injured or not necessarily injured, but had a down year in one shape or form or injury combined. And I'll throw the 3 names, and you let me know which one you think could blow up and catapult into that top 10. One is Amir Abdullah, ranked at number 18. Number 2 is Doug Martin, ranked at 20, who we've heard a ton of good things about. And number 3 at 26 is C.J. Anderson.
Yeah, I'm never going to select the Denver running back, so you can write that off, because it is July. No, it's June. Yeah, it's June. Okay. Since May, they've been talking about a timeshare at running back. So C.J. Anderson probably going to fall down my list. Like Amir Abdullah, I have him ranked higher. I am definitely going to be busting Doug Martin up there as well. Martin, I think, is being taken in the 10th round of 12-team drafts. Now, I get that he's going to miss 4 games to start the season, but it's going to have to take an act of God for him to not start the remaining 12 games. I mean, he could always mess up. I get it. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, but just purely based on his draft position, I just don't see a point in using him, not taking him where he's at. I think Abdullah is going to be fine, but with those weapons that now open up so much more for the Bucs, and Martin can just be used so much better, I just really like him this year. I like Dalvin Cook at 17. I like Gillislee at 19, though his price is starting to become, in mock drafts, I mean, you're paying for him. He's going in the 5th round. It's not a 9th and 10th round thing that's happening anymore. He's up there. The secret's out.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anybody that, especially as we get closer to drafts, that's going to quote unquote steal him.
No, and
later.
the craziest thing is, now that he's being drafted where he is, this just screams bust all over the place to me.
Well, I think that's very, very possible. There's another, I guess I'll say, interesting scenario. A few running back spots where if somebody can take the lead on that, they can do very, very well. You have in Seattle, you have Eddie Lacy, and you have Thomas Rawls. Rawls reportedly looking very good. You have Mark Ingram, who is hated by Coach Sean Payton, and Adrian Peterson. I'm wait and see on that. But two other ones that I think could be major players, the Washington game with, I'll let you pronounce the one.
Samaje Perine?
Yeah, him. And you also have Rob Kelly. Big Rob, Fat Rob, whatever they call him. So you have that. I think that could be an interesting scenario. That's a high-powered offense. And another one, Kenneth Dixon, who is suspended. You've also got Danny Woodhead, who went there, and Terrence West, who Terrence West looks very, very good. So if you're looking at a Baltimore running back or a Washington running back or even one of the Seattle running backs, who are you putting not all your chips in on, but most of your chips in on?
Well, that's a good one. In Seattle, most of my chips are going on CJ Prosise. I think that he's going to be the one that holds the most value in... I'm going to throw Cincinnati in there. I'm taking Jeremy Hill.
Really?
It's completely I just don't believe in Joe Mixon, the running back, as much as I believe in Joe Mixon, the gadget guy. Like, I believe in Joe Mixon, who it lines up behind the line of scrimmage and, you know, sets up a block or stays there to set up a block and then releases and goes downfield wide open because nobody's really eyeballing him because they think he's in a blocking format. And Jeremy Hill, like, I just think he profiles better as that straightforward runner, and Gio's likely to miss some games to start the season, and you're getting him for nothing. He's not being drafted. So what I'm prone to doing is taking him where I should be taking a kicker and just not taking a kicker. Try to consolidate some of my picks so that I could trade two of my players for maybe a better one and then pick up a kicker from there. But I'm eyeing that situation closely because I think that could turn out a lot differently than most people are expecting. Washington, that's tough, but I actually think I'm going to go with Rob Kelly. Baltimore, I just think wherever Woodhead goes, he just produces. And I know he's coming off an injury, and he's a much different beast in a PPR format than he is in a standard type of scoring system. But if I had to have one, I could see Woodhead scoring more touchdowns. I just don't think he's got the volume that Terrence West has.
I'll agree with that. I think West has great ability to be a first and second down guy, but they brought Woodhead in for a reason. I don't think there's any real shock as to what his role is going to be.
All right, let's play. Go ahead.
I was just going to say another guy that I personally like to look out for because I think there's going to be a lot of hype on Marshawn Lynch. If he can't go, I like DeAndre Washington in Oakland. Again, high-powered offense. Proved to have some game when he did get opportunities last year. But if Marshawn Lynch proves that his best days are behind him and he can't go, I could see DeAndre Washington getting a majority of the carries.
All right, let's play a game. I want to look at it from this perspective. We'll do both sides of the coin, and we'll wrap up the running back conversation today. Who do you see, at the top of the draft that gives you the largest pause and makes you think that they could be somewhat of a disappointment? And we'll say that's limited to top 20 backs.
Okay, well, I'll go one who's I mentioned earlier, Jordan Howard. For the reasons I mentioned, plus, aside from Matt Forte, there hasn't been a consistent running game. Granted, Jordan Howard was amazing last year. It'll be interesting to see if he can continue that. And the other guy that I'm absolutely worried about is Amir Abdullah. I owned him coming out of, when he came into the league. So I was very, very excited. But what has he shown us, even when healthy? Hasn't really shown us much. The days of Barry Sanders and even Kevin Jones, granted not putting them two in the same category, but the running game there is gone. It's the Matt Stafford show. I believe he was third in the league in passing yards, and there's a reason for that. It's partially because they have no running game, and another reason is because Matt Stafford can get the job done. So those are my two. There was a third one I was going to say, but I will let you go with that as well because I think I may know one of yours.
Well, for me, I already mentioned Mike Gillislee. That was pretty much, to me, it spells out a situation where people are literally people are drafting him expecting exactly what LeGarrette Blount did last year. That's just bluntly put, no pun intended, like that's what people want out of him. They think that he's going to be the guy who falls into the end zone. My biggest concern about him is, but Blount was touching the ball a lot. And, I mean, I'm quite confident that the Patriots have 10% of the league's active running backs on their team as it exists right now. So I'm just really concerned about a volume thing here when you're talking about potentially guys like Martin, Lynch, Henry, C.J. Anderson, Ingram, LeGarrette Blount being drafted below him. Like, all those guys could end up with higher volume. If I'm going like a top 10 player who I see having an issue, I'm still gonna say it's Ezekiel Elliott, and I know that people have him pegged that he's going to advance in the running game. I just think the Cowboys' defense is so bad that the passing game is going to be leaned on far more. It's not to say that Zeke won't be involved, but you're basically drafting him to do what he did last year or better, and that's tough.
That's a good point. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in New England because, they gave Rex Burkhead a decent amount of money. So I don't know what they're doing there. It's going to be really funny when in early August he takes Matt Jones.
Yeah.
Washington lets him go. Maybe they'll take Cameron Artis-Payne from Carolina, and then all of a sudden you have 12 running backs for you to draft. So it's going to be an exciting time for New England running backs, as it is every year. For me, the final thing that I will say on running backs
let's hold on. We got the other thing. You got to look at the opposite side of the spectrum. Who do you see being a guy that just knocks his ADP out of the park? Like, I'm trying to think. Like, Melvin Gordon was a 6th-round pick last year, and he had to have been, I know he was at least a top 10 back, maybe even top 5 in some formats.
I'm going to go very, very deep. One, I will go with Paul Perkins, 34, currently ranked with the Giants. And now I'm going to go, quite a bit deeper. Not quite a bit deeper, but about 12, 13 spots later. Kareem Hunt in Kansas City. I like that fit, and I think with Macklin gone, I know they have Tyreek Hill. Alex Smith isn't a QB1 whatsoever, so I actually could see Hunt being the man there. I think definitely blowing his ADP currently out of the water.
All right, I like the Chiefs pick. That's Kareem Hunt. Nice career at Toledo. Did well. Who was the first one you mentioned, since I can't seem to remember 5 seconds ago?
Paul Perkins.
Orleans Darkwood getting those first team reps. A little bit scary. You got to consider last year Perkins was the starter at the end of the season because there was no healthy Orleans Darkwood. Just keep that in mind. I think, not saying that Perkins won't be the guy, but these are things I'm looking at. My guy, who do I think is going to knock people out of the water based on his ADP this year? You're never going to believe the name I'm about to say.
Well, there's nobody named Hackenberg on the running back, so I think we're...
Frank Gore.
Why not? He's going to run till he's 50 anyway.
Every year we sit down and we say, this dude's too old. And every year he's a top 10 to top 15 producer. Christine Michael was just brought into the Colts and then put on the IR. So you've got Marlon Mack behind him, Josh Ferguson. Okay, that's great, but you have to just look at it and say where he's being drafted. If he doesn't turn out that well, you took a chance. You could probably pick up whoever is playing well for that team on the waiver wire, but until he proves otherwise, that's the route that I'm going. And if I had to pick anyone else, I already said Jeremy Hill, but I don't want to say him again. I think Derrick Henry has the potential to see more carries. I'm finding myself in most of my mock drafts right now landing him between the 8th and the 10th round. And my basic philosophy is, my last 2 picks are reserved for the waste of position that is a kicker and a defense. I'm building my team. I'm not always taking a tight end, because there's a lot of tight ends that just aren't getting drafted right now that I'd be fine with having on my team at least to start the year. But I think Henry, he's one of the better handcuffs, and I don't believe in that as it is, but he's one of the better handcuffs that there is in the league, and he's gonna have to see a larger share of the running back carries.
I think you're right, and I do have a final thought on running backs, so it makes for a nice segue. I was going to say my final thought on running backs before I jump the gun, because I'm so excited to get into wide receivers, but I was going to say my final thought on running backs. They are back, no pun intended. It is the return of the back. Hopefully Mark Morrison, as well as his Burger King sponsorship, will sponsor us so I can sing our new intro with him. And thou shalt not mess with Frank Gore, because when all is said and done, when this earth is nothing more, the one thing you can count on is Frank Gore. So he'll still be running for about 900 yards and 12 touchdowns.
All right, that wraps it up for today. Keep your eyes posted for our follow-up video on wide receivers. Check us out at researchfantasy.com. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel below. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. BC?
At 1SF Podcast on Twitter, on the Facebook, BC_Steele on Instagram, where I post food, sports, and local professional wrestling if you're in the Pittsburgh area. But I am worldwide and entertaining. And as always, reprise the theme song and roll the credits.